Well, the plan, the 28-point plan, has a number of important elements which are essential to a just and lasting peace, and that's what we all want. There is more to do on the plan, and we've had a meeting this afternoon of like-minded leaders from the Coalition of the Willing, who are here at the G20, to engage on that. And tomorrow in Geneva, there'll be a meeting of senior US personnel, of the Ukrainians, and of NSA's national security advisors from Europe, including my national security advisor, to take things further forward.
And have you spoken to President Trump yet about this peace plan personally?
I talk to President Trump frequently, and I'm expecting to talk to him again in coming days. But look, there's been a lot of discussion in the last few days at the European level with the Ukrainians. It is fast moving, as you say. I think the focus very much now is on Geneva tomorrow, and whether we can make progress tomorrow morning.
Prime Minister, does the US proposal amount to a surrender to Russia? Could you personally accept the deal as it stands? And could you counsel your friend President Zelensky to accept such a deal?
Well, we're talking to President Zelensky pretty well continually. I spoke to him yesterday along with Chancellor Merz and President Macron. I'm expecting to talk to President Zelensky again in about an hour or so, hopefully, if we can set that up. And of course, we'll be there in Geneva tomorrow. It is important to keep firmly in mind what we're all trying to achieve, which is a just and lasting peace. But also underpinning that is the principle that I've always adhered to, that all matters about Ukraine must be determined in the end by Ukraine, and that's why we're talking very regularly with the Ukrainians.
Final question, are the UK and other allies scenario planning now to potentially continue this war, supporting Ukraine without the US in the fight if they don't move on these elements of the deal that are not palatable to President Zelensky? Well,
I'm absolutely clear in my mind that President Trump wants a just and lasting peace, not just from the actions he's taken towards that end, but also from the private discussions that I've had with him one-to-one on this issue. So I know what he's trying to achieve. We all want to achieve that, and that is what our focus is. I think it is important to say that one of the elements in the 28-point plan is the security guarantee from the US, an Article 5 guarantee. That's about the strongest guarantee that can be put forward. And so that fortifies in me the belief that what we're all trying to achieve here is a just and lasting peace, but it'll only be just and lasting if there are security guarantees and if we bear in mind that matters for Ukraine are always to be determined by Ukraine.
Well, let's go live now to Johannesburg in South Africa. Our political editor, Beth Rigby, is standing by for us. And Ukraine once again dominating the agenda at the G20 summit, which, of course, you've been at for the last 2 days. So Keir Starmer talking to the UK media there, trying to find that delicate balance between protecting Ukraine assets but not angering President Trump. Do you think he's managing it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Look, there have been some developments over the past few hours. As you said, this peace plan put into play last week, drawn up between the US administration and Russia, Ukraine not at the table. The Europeans hadn't had sight of it at all either. And what's happened in the past 48 hours at the G20 is Europeans and Ukraine have been scrambling to try and reinsert themselves into that process. To that end, we have had 2 meetings, or 2 calls at least, with the E3, that's the UK, France and Germany, a call with President Zelensky and those leaders yesterday. The Prime Minister saying there he hopes to speak again with President Zelensky in the next hour. And then we've had a meeting again today with the G7+, so the G7 leaders that are here and some other countries. Where have we got to? There is now this meeting in Geneva tomorrow. It seems like certainly our Prime Minister and other Europeans putting a lot of weight into that. National security advisors from various European nations, including the UK, will attend. That means Jonathan Powell will attend on behalf of the UK with Ukrainians and US officials there, as well as Europe tries to weave Ukrainian interests back into this plan. And you can see from what the Prime Minister said there, they're not really getting much further than tomorrow. And there is a tight deadline here. And I think what was so interesting about the way in which Keir Starmer managed that interview there about the latest developments is the way in which he is still trying to bind in President Trump. One source told me that the Prime Minister at the moment is playing a form of whack-a-mole, just trying to knock down any Europeans or anyone else that want to come out and criticise Donald Trump and say that this is not a workable plan for Ukraine, for fear that that will only serve to not further Ukraine's interests. So they're trying to keep President Trump on board. The Prime Minister saying there that President Trump, like them, wants a just and lasting peace, that this plan needs some work. And then at the end, when I asked him about really the critical question about how does this war continue for Ukraine if they don't want to settle on Trump's terms and they can't improve the deal, is it left then to Europeans and the Ukrainians to try to continue? And the Prime Minister there just completely avoiding that question and saying instead that the US had put in security guarantees to this 28-point plan, that was very important to this peace, saying again that any deal on Ukraine has to involve Ukraine, but trying to bind President Trump back in there. But I have to say, it feels at the moment like this is a discussion and talks between the Russians and the US, with the UK, with Europeans, with Ukraine, trying to force their way back in. And President Trump has set this deadline for Thursday. I think part of the efforts tomorrow will be whether or not they can just get the US to take a beat and slow this whole process down. It is going to be a very high-stakes couple of days.
OK, we'll leave it there, Beth, for now. Thank you very much. Beth Rigby live in Johannesburg for us. And as Beth was mentioning, the US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will travel to Geneva for talks tomorrow with Ukrainian officials. Russia will not be at those talks, but US officials say Russia will be involved in further discussions soon. Donald Trump said Ukraine's president is going to have to approve his controversial proposed peace plan, even if he doesn't like it. The US president says he wants a deal agreed by Thursday. Well, let's have a look at some of those key details of the deal. It requires Ukraine to hand territory to Russia, which Russia has taken by force in Crimea and the Donbass, and land it has fought but failed to seize. In Kherson and Zaporizhia regions, land will be divided along current military lines. There would be demilitarized zones. Russia would give up small pockets of land that it has taken. The Ukrainian military would be limited to 600,000 personnel, and Ukraine would be forever barred from joining NATO. Talks between Russia and NATO would be mediated by the United States.